watching CramerSez. Welcome. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. It is Friday, December 19th. Welcome to the show. And tonight we're going to be talking about why the fuck do we continue to do what we're doing? Why do we do it? Bulgaria just proved that what you can do is check out. You don't have to play by the rules anymore. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Our special guest tonight is Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin Dahlgren is an activist in Portland. He is working with the homeless, and it's far worse than they're letting you know that it is. We'll be talking to him tonight as our special guest in segment 2. But going back to, where we are in this country, why are we paying taxes? What do you get out of it? What's the benefit to you? There are none. You don't get the benefits that you're supposed to be getting from what you're paying for. Not that you don't get roads, not that you don't get schools, not that you don't get all the things that they promise you, but you get the minimal of that. They spend as little as possible on that. And what I mean is the product. Not the system that creates the product, but the product itself. Our roads are worse, our kids are dumber, and saying that we need to pay in more. If we pay in more, they'll do a better job. We're already paying in billions, and they can't do it with that. My grandfather was raised in a one-room schoolroom and was an engineer. Didn't even go to college. You don't need this big system that they're telling us that we need. We don't need to keep pouring money in both ends of the funnel and being told that we're the bad guy. Bulgaria just told their government we're done. We withdraw our consent. Without firing a shot, the government stepped down. Why did they do that? Well, primarily because in Bulgaria they have less to lose than we have here. One of the references I heard recently is that their chains are more like wires, easy to break. We have chains. We are chained to our lifestyle. We're chained to the house. We're chained to the boat. We're chained to the motorcycle. We're chained to the education of the kids. We're chained to the vacation in 4 weeks. We're chained to all the things of our culture. They're not. Their freedom is more important to them. Those chains do not matter. They don't have them. They've got a lower GDP, they don't live as fancy as we live. They don't have the options that we have. So when they get the chance to choose between, do I want to continue being a slave or do I want to live free, they generally choose freedom. Sadly, in America, we're choosing to be slaves. I saw a thing here recently that said that based on how the Egyptians held their slaves, basically what the Egyptians had to do was give their work, and then 20% of what they created in their farms, they had to give that to the Pharaoh as well. 20%. Seems cheap. You got a job, and all you have to do is pay up 20% of it. Seems cheap compared to what we're doing today. Compared that the majority of Americans are taxed somewhere in the ballparks, 37 to 40% of their income. Now, I'm asking you what you get for that, because some people do get something out of it. Some people do. Most people don't. That's the whole thing. It's a Ponzi scheme. Isn't that what we're discovering? That it's a Ponzi scheme and it's about to collapse? We're the ones at the end of this musical chairs game. We're going to be holding the last chairs. No place to go, no place to set. As we keep waiting for this other shoe drop. Now, I've been told by socialists that taxation paying for schools and paying for fire and paying for the police and paying for the other things that we need, our roads and so on, that's socialism. That's what I've been told. That's what they like to say. But even they know that that's a lie. That is not correct. It's not socialism to tax somebody and say, for that, you're getting this service. Socialism is taking my pay and giving it to that motherfucker right there. He didn't do dick. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't want to work. He's a drug addict. He's a thief. He's elite in society. You take your hand and you put it in my pocket, you draw out my money, and you give it to that motherfucker? That's socialism. Me being willing to put a little in the pot just in case, that motherfucker comes in my neighborhood, I can call the cops. Or if that motherfucker comes over and sets my house on fire because he's fucking insane, I can call the fire department. That's not socialism. Giving my money to that motherfucker, that's socialism. We've got to start talking in the language of our founding fathers, folks, and be very, very truthful with what we want. You see, we can do the same thing from our government. That's what our Constitution allows us to do. It allows us to withdraw consent from the governed, right? Of the governed. We don't have to play by the rules anymore. Nope. You've gone too far. We don't trust you. You're all fucking crooks. You're all dealing in and dealing out. There may be a couple of you that are good, but the rest of you, you're all fucking suck. And the good ones won't say anything about you. They won't turn on you. So they're just as bad as you. Fuck them all. Chip Roy said that today. He says, based on what we're doing and what we're offering the American people, I wouldn't be shocked if the American people could get rid of all 435 of us and all 100 senators. What's he telling you? That's a subtle way of saying the American people are done. We're done playing this game. What are we getting for it? Did you know that there was a pot of money out there that Democrats are okay with just being stolen by a group of foreigners and sent overseas to be potentially used against us? Do you know that Democrats are doing that currently? They're fine with that. Some rhinos are fine with that. They have no problem with that. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with my money that they're wanting. You see, coming up in April, there's a date where they're going to say, hey, all you successful motherfuckers, you guys that we didn't get taxed enough last year, you're going to have to pony up just a little bit more. You got to pay that up on the 15th. And they're going to ask us all to write a goddamn check. I ain't writing that fucking check. I'm done. I'd withdraw my consent to be governed by these people that are corrupt. Everybody's looking tonight at the Epstein files. Did you honestly think that there was going to be anything in there? Really? This football they've been tossing back and forth? If the Bidens had anything in there, they had to look at that information. I'll bet if you go back in and you look at how many people were looking at that data and signing things in and signing things out to look at that information over the last 4 years, the Biden administration went in there and made sure that there was nothing in there of them. They left behind what they've got. Well, Trump's already cleared it out. It's removed any pictures from him. If they had any pictures of him, they wouldn't have to have fabricated the 34 felonies out of a goddamn misdemeanor. If they had anything. I was talking to a journalist today. I said, if they had anything, he goes, yeah, you'd already use it. Folks, if I got to tell you, if I had found in my discoveries a photo of Trump with his dick in something that he shouldn't have his dick in or something inappropriate, do you know what I would have done? Because I'm a tattletale. I would have shown you. I would have said, this is the man. This is what he said, but we haven't seen that. Now, let me ask you this. I'm a truth teller. I don't have any political, ambitions to become president and replace Trump. There are other people that do. And there are other people that don't want him anywhere near power. So do you think if they had access to anything that proved that Trump is who they say he is, don't you think they would have already shown that by now? Well, yeah. Fuck yeah.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
CramerSez returns after this message from our partners.
The CramerSez Project will return
After this important message.
Introducing Tusk.
With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing.
All while protecting your privacy.
Choose the news you trust and take control of your internet.
Join the free speech revolution with Tusk.
Download Tusk today at tuskbrowser.com.
For decades, the Smith-Mundt Act protected Americans from U.S. government propaganda meant for foreign audiences.
But in 2012, the Modernization Act gutted those safeguards, allowing taxpayer-funded misinformation to flood our media and minds.
Over the last 10 plus years, we've seen the damage.
Take COVID-19 messaging as an example.
The government pushed relentless vaccine campaigns and lockdowns, often suppressing dissenting science, leading to widespread distrust and division.
Election narratives.
Federal agencies amplified Russia collusion stories and censored social media, influencing public opinion and elections under the guise of fighting disinformation.
Climate change agendas.
Billions in funding promoted alarmist green policies, downplaying economic impacts and alternative views to push globalist initiatives.
This isn't freedom, it's manipulation.
Urge President Trump to overturn the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act and restore protections against domestic propaganda.
Take action today. Sign the petition now and make your voice heard while you still have the chance.
To learn more about the CramerSez project, our mission, and how you can become a part of it, please visit thecramersezproject.com.
You're watching CramerSez.
Let me remind you that our founding fathers, they went to war with the most powerful nation on the face of the earth, told them, nope, we're not doing that anymore, kicked him out of the country, right? Got rid of all the corrupt, all the Tories, sent them all back home to England, right? Over a 3-cent tax. Not 3%, not 3-cent tax. I believe it was on a ton of tea. An additional 3 cents on a ton of tea. It was a lot of fucking tea. A little tax, just a little bit. That was enough to send them over the edge. What do you think that they would be doing today? I can tell you what our founding fathers are doing today. They're rolling over in their graves going, what the fuck are you doing with the sacrifices that we made for you guys? So I said earlier, it's not socialism to have police, education, fire departments, roads. That's not, because we all share in that equally. Right? The vast majority of us share in that equally. Yes, there are always outliers. They're the people that don't have any kids, or they moved to this area after they had kids, right? There's all this, yes, but we all share in that together because we all benefit from that together. We can all use the roads. I can call the same police officers that you can call, right? We call the same fire department. Hey, my house is on fire. Yeah, so is mine. And they will come regardless of who we are, regardless of what color we are, regardless of what part of town we live in. That's not socialism. We all share in that. Where it's socialism is where you put your hand in my pocket and you say, you know what? This scientist over here, he's got a great fucking idea. What we're going to do is we're going to take just a little bit of your money and give it to him so he can prove that if you stick this thermometer up that rhesus monkey's butt, that monkey ain't going to like it very much. He's probably going to have a bad attitude. We're going to need $10 million for that. That's the kind of crazy batshit, crazy bullshit that we're done with. You want to do that? That goes in line with charity. Well, we're doing this for charitable causes. Listen, you don't put your hand in my pocket and rip it out and say that you're going to handle the charity that I give. Charity isn't forced. And that's what they've done. If you say anything about, oh, you want the starving children? Absolutely, yes, I want starving children. Yeah, you got me. Yep, that's what I'm advocating for, starving kids in the streets. That's what I want. Of course not. You know that's not the case. But you think that that's going to help you win. Well, we're done arguing that way. We've given you the money. The kids are still starving in the streets, so your way isn't working. We got to pull back the money from you. You don't know how to use it. The people that are advocating the hardest for socialism live in places that are completely broke. California, I don't care how much Gavin Newsom brags about his economy and how strong it is in California. If you put 2 and 2 together, you understand real quick, California is fucking broke. And the moment this immigration system gets fixed, really gets fixed, California's cheap farm labor, that whole market collapses. Will it have an impact on food prices and so on? Yes. But primarily, it will have an impact on California. They're broke. They rely on that cheap labor. That's why they're screaming so loud about it. America is on the edge, folks. And they are waiting for you to tell them what to do next, just like in Bulgaria. Now, you can sit back and you can be chained to your life. You can remain a slave to the Wave Runner and to the vacation and the cruise and all the other things that you've got planned. You can remain a slave to those things, and that's what they're counting on. They're counting on you finding that more important, that the bread and circus is more important than your liberties and freedoms as they chip away day by day by day by day at everything our founding fathers not only came up with. Think about this. These men could have started another monarchy. We're going to make George king. That's what they wanted to do initially. Remember that? They wanted to make George Washington king, and he said, no, that's not what we fought for. Did they form the most perfect nation? No. But they produced one that strives for a more perfect. Never perfect, always trying. There are people today that are making a lot of money talking about slavery and the suffering of slavery. You're right. It was terrible. And a lot of white men and a lot of black men died to end that in this country. And the only people that have kept it alive in any way, shape, or form is the left. First through the KKK, then Jim Crow, then all the bullshit that they did throughout the South with the KKK throughout all the way up until the 50s, fighting the civil rights movement in the 60s. When you see the pictures of Martin Luther King Jr. on that bridge with all those other black people, and you see those dots of white faces in there, do you know who that is? Those are Republicans walking on that bridge. Those are not Democrats marching. They did not do this. They do not own the civil rights of this nation. The Republican Party does, from the very beginning to the very end. The GOP was formed specifically to abolish slavery. Specifically. Democrats didn't do that. Democrats owned the slaves. They keep trying to make you forget that part of it. Today, in their pieces, they don't talk about the South being Democrat. They don't talk about the South being slave owners, and that all the Democrats were slave owners. Not a single Republican ever owned a slave. Democrats can't say that. In fact, they fought a war to maintain that right. Oh, it's our right to own humans. It's not what our founding fathers founded this nation on. They even talked about it back then. Were they perfect? No, they were not perfect men. But they didn't do anything that anybody wasn't doing at the time. I like how this crew today that comes in and tries to make every white person guilty for the sins of somebody else 200 years ago, I had nothing to do with it. I don't have any benefit from slavery. My family got to this country after all that was done with. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, you goddamn racist. I didn't have anything to do with it. I've never owned a slave. Well, you've benefited from the white privilege. Fuck off. I was raised in poverty in black neighborhoods. Where was my white fucking privilege? I got beat up because I was the white kid in the black neighborhood. Where was my fucking privilege? You know what it did? It didn't make me hate black people. It toughened me up. You know who some of my best friends are? Black people. You know why? Because of what we have in common. The culture that we share has nothing to do with the skin color that I have or the skin color that they have. Some of my best fishing buddies, black guys. Why? My black buddies know how to fish. Now, they cook catfish, and I hate that shit. I don't like it. I just do not like catfish. Well, I cook it a way that'll make... No, you don't. I will taste that fucking mud. I'm sorry, can't do it. I've tried it a million times. Not going to try yours. I'm done. I've tried enough muddy catfish to know I don't want to do that. But that's the whole thing, folks. Very diverse group in this nation. And we're being told by a bunch of people who monetize off of hate. We don't have hate in this nation. There's no systemic racism in this nation. What we have is we have multiple cultures going on in this nation. That's the problem. I don't know what the white culture is. I know what the American culture is. I don't know what the black culture is. I know what the American culture is. I don't know what the Hispanic culture is. I know what the American culture is. And I don't know what the Asian culture is, but I know what the American culture is. Do you know what the American culture is? The American culture doesn't have any fucking hyphens in it. We're Americans. We don't get butthurt because this group over here is getting made fun of. That's not us. Somebody's making fun of your home country, where your ancestors came from, and somehow that's hurtful to you? Grow the fuck up. Either you're an American or you're not. That's what the melting pot is all about. My family's from Western Europe. We go to war with Western Europe? I ain't fighting for them. I ain't going to be crying for them. Fuck them. They're picking on one of the greatest nations on the face of the earth, the greatest nation on the face of the earth that's ever been produced, in my opinion. You want to fuck with us? Come on. We'll play. But this thing that we've got in this country, that's how they divide us. They put a hyphen between everything. Trans this, bi that, African this, right? Asian this, Hispanic this. None of my buddies of any race have a hyphen. They're all Americans. And in a race war, I think the funny thing about it, we're all going to be our backs to each other because we're the only ones that we know we can trust. Right? We're not going to be going out looking for trouble. You to us, we'll have our backs to each other, defending each other. Because we are true brothers and our skin color does not matter. That's what makes America great. That's America. Not this bullshit, it belonged to this group or that group or this specialty group or, oh, we're the hurt victims of this, and this. It's gotten out of hand. And now they want to make you believe that somehow you're a bad American if you say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this bullshit. I'm sick and tired of it. I can't do it anymore, folks. I won't do it anymore. I will not be a participant in their psychosis. It's sick to think that there's people out there that will fight to the death, deny you your rights if you don't take the medication that they think that you should take to keep them safe. You think they went away? They would come back in a heartbeat. The moment something comes in, similar. Oh, we're going to have a bad cold and flu season this year. Karens will come out in droves. All over again. And they won't have any problem putting you in jail and locking you up and telling you how to live your life. They're doing that right now, and there isn't even a pandemic. There's not even a problem. But if you shine a light on the weirdness of what they believe and what they're into, somehow you're a hater. No, I want to know more about you and why you think that you have the authority to tell me anything on how to live my life. This is the whole thing. We got to get these fucking Karens out of everything, folks. Everything. It only gets worse. The more Karens we get, the worse it gets. The more people we have involved in government, the worse it gets. Why? Because it's just one more opinion on how you should have to live your life. I don't know about you, but I'm done with it. Up next, we'll talk to Kevin Dahlgren and the homeless problem in Portland. We'll see you then.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
CramerSez returns after this message from our partners.
They lied about it. They tried to hide it.
It was 100% unconstitutional. That's what we were saying in 2024.
I could have sworn that yesterday we learned that the FBI tapped my phone.
And today the NLPC has been vindicated by Senator Grassley's document dump, revealing Jack Smith illegally and unconstitutionally spied on American citizens.
Jack Smith spied members of the United States Senate. What is this, East Germany?
Grassley's document dump has revealed that Jack Smith's team illegally seized call logs from Ron Johnson, Lindsey Graham, Mike Lee, and Josh Hawley in the unconstitutional 2023 Arctic Frost Probe.
From the outset, we said Jack Smith's appointment was unconstitutional. A federal judge vindicated that view. Now we see the connection between unconstitutional prosecutions and illegal evidence gathering.
The NLPC has been on top of this story from the beginning. Follow or subscribe to the NLPC on this platform for more. Or visit the National Legal and Policy Center at nlpc.org.
To learn more about the CramerSez Project, our mission, and how you can become a part of it, please visit thecramersezproject.com.
You're watching CramerSez. You're watching CramerSez.
back to the show. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. It is Friday. Our guest today, tonight will be Kevin Dahlgren. We'll be talking to him. But before we get to Kevin, let's talk about the CramerSez Project. If you've been following me for a while, one of the things you know, I've been trying to build a grassroots news service, talking to people directly as opposed to going through the mainstream media. We need you to be a part of it. We can't do this alone. So please join us at the CramerSezProject.com and see if you can help us out there. All grassroots. I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for your time and your energy. So it's a lot easier to do, right? Give me some attention over there at the CramerSezProject.com. Now, let's go and talk about what's going on in Portland, Oregon. They've got a...
You're watching CramerSez.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. It is Friday. Our guest today, tonight will be Kevin Dahlgren. We'll be talking to him. But before we get to Kevin, let's talk about the CramerSez Project. If you've been following me for a while, one of the things you know, I've been trying to build a grassroots news service, talking to people directly as opposed to going through the mainstream media. We need you to be a part of it. We can't do this alone. So please join us over at the CramerSezProject.com and see if you can help us out there. All grassroots. I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for your time and your energy. So it's a lot easier to do, right? Give me some attention over there at the CramerSezProject.com. Now, let's go and talk about what's going on in Portland, Oregon. They've got a serious problem with homelessness, and one of the guys that's taking a look at that is Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin, welcome to the show. First of all, I love what you're doing out there and exposing just how bad this is. I was homeless when I was a kid, and I'm shocked to learn that it is substantially worse on the streets right now today than it was back, 40, 50 years ago when I was a kid. So explain to us, how did you get into this, and where do you see this going if we don't get a handle on it fairly quickly?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, brother. I worked in social services over 28 years in Portland, Oregon. Kind of got into it because I always had this strong desire to help. I think what really inspired me, though, was my little brother in the 90s ended up on the streets of Portland with a meth addiction. And I was inspired to, after helping him off the streets and trying to learn how to wade this complex social service system, I said, well, I think I want to keep doing this. So I did it for another 3 decades. My brother's thriving to this day, and that's great. Unfortunately, working in social services was not as glamorous as I realized. and it not only was just difficult work, I just found it to be extraordinarily dysfunctional. Like, I just was really surprised, especially with dealing with human suffering and life or death situations, like with drug use and stuff like that, or people freezing to death on the streets. We would have some real plan, a standardized FEMA type response or something to really take care of this, but we just didn't. It was like these little efforts here and there that weren't really making a big difference. And I really was confused by that for a long time. Long story short, is kind of rude awakening was we never really had a plan. Nobody really came up with any good idea, I guess, to fix this. And then over time I realized, well, it's not as hard as people think. It's complex but not complicated, right? And I noticed that the system, especially in primarily West Coast cities, because I've done extensive research on this, pivoted from this almost like medical model to this ideological model, meaning there's people were on the streets using drugs, committing crimes, not because of their own doing, but because they were victims of something larger, right? Such as capitalism and things like that. And I'm like, well, look, we can have the debate and discussion once they're off the streets, whatever, but why have it now when they're on the streets? Because they're just suffering and dying, right? And this has just gotten worse and worse and worse over time. It's really tragic, especially it happening in Portland, Oregon, which, a man in my 50s growing up in Portland, this was a wonderful city back in the day, right? It was safe. It was clean. It was artistic. People got along. It was just kind of like this little secret of ours that we had this great city that nobody really knew about, and it's just kind of turned into this kind of hellhole. And I completely blame radicalized policies. At the end of the day, I just don't think this was that difficult to solve. We don't have assertive outreach to help these individuals. We have the lowest ranked mental health system in the United States, right? We have one of the highest rates of drug use in the United States. Yep. And you have to ask why. But when you dig deeper, you realize a lot of it is politically motivated, such as drug use. It's all about bodily autonomy and a person's right to use, right? Or even homelessness. Home is where you make it, and you have a choice to live on the streets because you're human, and we're, like there's all these reasons why they weren't being helped. So I basically finally just got fed up enough to leave social services and just become a full-time journalist to talk about what I learned the last decades, to try to expose this, which is important to fix the system, but most importantly, work together to end this crisis once and for all, which I truly believe should have been solved a long time ago. Yes, of course it's complex, but we're smart people, right? We're all educated and motivated and passionate. And I feel like the needle is slowly moving, at least back to common sense, but it's still like this uphill battle because there's these forces at play that even with a good idea, so many people are against solving this, because if you do, you've worked yourself out of a job.
Well, that's one of the things that we've seen about, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on this issue, these special interest groups, these NGO type groups that come in, that are funded, they've built themselves up to solve a problem. And once they solve that problem, if they're successful, they put themselves out of a job. And they don't want to do that. In fact, they want to grow and build. So they're always finding some new emergency or new reason to spend that money or call for money. And solving the problem does not, just like we talk about the pharmaceutical companies, curing the person, gets rid of a customer. Do you feel that some officials feel the same way?
Yeah, well, and look at it this way. Of course, I don't believe that there's some evil Wizard of Oz person who is like, we can't solve this because we'll lose our jobs. But I think subconsciously you realize if you were to significantly step up your efforts and fix this crisis in a year, you'd realize there's no more reason for us to have funding. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to have to pivot to something else. And so basically we've put these people in a position of power to, in a sense, work themselves out of a job, and they don't want to do that. So they kind of pivoted, about 10 years ago from the permanent solution to keeping people comfortable on the streets. Right. Yep. And I think they did this. I have to believe on some level they did this just to kind of maintain the status quo. I mean, there's no other explanation, because the fact is, if I were in charge, the first thing I would do is make this some kind of FEMA type response. I'd be like, this is an actual emergency. You're going to immediately have this, and every trained, educated, passionate person out there is going to be on the streets doing everything they can to fix this immediately. We do this with almost anything else. I'd say treat this like a natural disaster, right? What happens during a major earthquake? People, the ones who've lived, 90% of them naturally come out of that house and want to help, right? They pick up the rubble.
Kevin, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in, and the reason I'm with you 100%. I think we've got a severe problem here. But unlike what I was saying earlier, when I was on the streets back in the 80s, we didn't have the mental health issues that we currently have right now on the streets. Those people were still in the insane asylums back in the 80s. They were just starting to be released onto the streets at that point. How much does that have to do with this? Because I was out there of my own volition, and when I got ready to get serious about life, I had the mental capacity to get my life together. I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't an alcoholic. I just decided I didn't want to live in mom and dad's house anymore. So I look at what's going on today as, would you consider me an outlier from what you're seeing today on the streets versus that wouldn't be the normal thing, right?
Well, I mean, at this point, we do have a lot of people who actually choose to be out there. Yeah. It's a much higher percentage of people realize. The most common type population on the streets are the chemically addicted and mentally ill.
Yeah.
It's very high. I would say 80% of every homeless person is actively using drugs. About 70% have some kind of mental health issue. Doesn't mean it has to be like an extreme issue, but they got a lot going on, right?
Right.
There's definitely a larger percent population that you would be surprised to hear choose to live on the streets. And they choose it for a variety of reasons: a mistrust in the system. They didn't feel like they got their needs met or help, so they finally just gave up and stopped asking. It's our job as the public that are housed to assertively work with them again, build that trust again, bring back that hope, and hopefully they'll change their minds, get free. The reason why I say this is because you can't really technically force anybody to do that, because a person who chooses to live on the streets, legally speaking, it's very challenging to force them, borderline kidnapping, to be honest,
right,
to basically make a person do this. Yes, they're in violation of a variety of things like loitering and camping and littering and all that stuff, but still it puts a big burden on our legal system about what to actually do. So the only workaround is to kind of help them understand why housing is better than this. But you have all these nonprofits and all these activist groups working against us by saying, we're harm reduction workers. We want to give you pipes and foil and straws and needles to keep using, or you have a right to be homeless because you are a victim of capitalism. And there's all these forces working against us to try to help these individuals. So they're almost like these pawns in the middle of this ideological war we're having. And that's just very disappointing. I try to keep politics out of it. I see someone in crisis. I don't care how they ended up there. All I care about is they're there, and let's try to help them. Once they're stable and in housing, we can all discuss why they went to the streets, how they ended up on the streets, what kept them on the streets, whatever. But, treat it like the crisis it is.
Well, how much when I was on the streets, again, this was 40 some years ago, Kevin, it seemed like there was more of a swinging door, right? A revolving door of people that went through. You would see people come through. Am I wrong in assuming that these people today are, many of them, permanent street people, that they will never leave the streets? They will most likely die there?
There is a lot of people in the streets, surprisingly, would not accept any help whatsoever. I have met a high percentage of the homeless population of a couple different major cities, and I've worked with them for years. So I have a pretty strong understanding who these people are. And a lot of them just simply consider it a lifestyle.
Yeah.
They are so used to being taken care of. I mean, ultimately what we've done is we've enabled them to the point of dependency where there's no motivation to leave the streets because they're kind of well taken care of. Free tents and tarps and food, and people will show up and hand them whatever they want. And, they get gift lists of whatever they want to buy. And, I mean, for some people who aren't super motivated, might be pretty happy in that situation because also they have no bills, no responsibility. And if they're an addict, they can just spend all their time getting high while people go to their tent and be like, I want to give you something more. Right.
Yep.
And it's sad, but you see this a lot. So I'm a big believer in empowering a person, not enabling them, help them reach their fullest potential, which is something we would do to any of our loved ones, So I kind of think we need to look at the homeless differently, and don't look at them not necessarily as victims, but an opportunity for us to help them thrive and to do everything in our power to help them reach their fullest potential. That's what I've always believed. And
well, that's what we found here in Indianapolis. For years, I worked with Outreach Indiana, which is a group that helps homeless teens in particular. And Kevin, what we found is, to your point, there's a number of different reasons why these kids are on the streets, right? I was lucky. My dad was a minister. I came from a loving home. I just didn't like the rules, and I wanted to be on the streets. Well, I did want to be on the streets. I just didn't want to be at home. There's a big difference, I guess. But these kids are out there because of sexual exploitation, drug use with inside the home, violence with inside the home. New boyfriend comes in, doesn't like the male son of the girlfriend, and so kicks the boy out. He's 14, 15 years old in the streets. Can we talk about that and your Substack when we come back? Take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
The CramerSez Project will return
After this important message.
Introducing Tusk,
With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing.
all while protecting your privacy.
Choose the news you trust and take control of your internet.
Join the free speech revolution with Tusk.
Download Tusk today at tuskbrowser.com.
For decades, the Smith-Mundt Act protected Americans from U.S. government propaganda meant for foreign audiences.
But in 2012, the Modernization Act gutted those safeguards, allowing taxpayer-funded misinformation to flood our media and minds.
Over the last 10-plus years, we've seen the damage.
Take COVID-19 messaging as an example.
The government pushed relentless vaccine campaigns and lockdowns, often suppressing dissenting science, leading to widespread distrust and division.
Election narratives.
Federal agencies amplified Russia collusion stories and censored social media, influencing public opinion and elections under the guise of fighting disinformation.
Climate change agendas.
Billions in funding promoted alarmist green policies, downplaying economic impacts and alternative views to push globalist initiatives.
This isn't freedom, it's manipulation.
Urge President Trump to overturn the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act and restore protections against domestic propaganda.
Take action today. Sign the petition now and make your voice heard while you still have the chance.
To learn more about the CramerSez project, our mission, and how you become a part of it, please visit thecramersezproject.com.
You're watching CramerSez.
Welcome. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. Our special guest is Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin and I are talking today about the homeless issue in Portland. It's not just in Portland, it's everywhere across the country, and it's involving kids, and they've got a bunch of different reasons for being on the street. Like I said before we went to break, when I went onto the streets and lived in my car for over a year, I did that of my own choice, my own volition. I just didn't want to live by my mom and dad's rules anymore, so I left. That's not the case for all of these kids, right? Break it down for what you're seeing.
Well, I mean, it's a mix. There's people that choose to live on the streets. There's people who got stuck in a complex system and have no idea how to actually get help. So they feel like they have no choice but to stay on the streets, right? We have a high percentage of mental illness and addiction issues on the streets. Fentanyl certainly didn't help. And overall, what we just have is this perfect storm of all these issues intersecting at the same time, and it's just created this big old mess, but at the end of the day, I blame mostly the social service system. They're supposed to be the ones that solve this. We give the experts. I mean, at the end of the day, you got the people who are suffering, whether they're choosing to or not, but then you got the experts that are really being paid to fix this, and they are not doing it. But when you do this work every day, you realize it's complex but not complicated, right? There's pretty simple solutions to a lot of these things, but we just simply won't do it. And it's very frustrating. So I really, in many ways, hold the system accountable for a lot of this because, in some ways, it's hard to blame an addict in the middle of their addiction, why they keep doing what they're going to do over and over again. I would argue it's sometimes a responsibility of the sober public to be like, stop doing that, right? Because they don't have critical thinking or rational thought, right? And so we need to take that more assertive approach, something we're not doing whatsoever. And
do you see the pendulum swinging back and a return back to the, hopefully not, but a return back to the asylums of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, where these people are, to your point, kidnapped off the street and put back in to a safe place for their own safety and the safety of the public? Do you see that pendulum swinging back that far?
It's a tough call, but I mean, there's been some good things happening lately. Last week, Trump called fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. Trump yesterday rescheduled marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug from a Schedule 1 drug, which basically was grouping it with heroin, meth, and crack, right?
Yep.
And so that's a positive because that helps the public understand that there are differences, right?
Yep.
And I admire the hell out of that because that is a very good step forward. And that's going to be a hard thing for another president to say reverse, because the fact is most of the public agrees. So little things like that can make long-term changes, but still what I haven't seen is a legitimate emergency response to this crisis, right? And the reason why is at the end of the day, like say today, President Trump says this is a true emergency. We're going to do everything we can. If he does not have the support of local governments, it's just not going to get done.
100%. Yep.
At the end of the day, short of having National Guard in every major city, they're going to find a way to just not do it. There has to be political will, and there is not. Right.
Well, and we saw in not San Francisco, I saw in LA a story where one of the, some lady was bragging about the fact that she was making $274,000 a year as a social worker.
Yeah.
Helping the poor. And this wasn't even homeless. She was just helping the poor, making $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
I think people look at that and see that as ludicrous, don't you?
It is. I mean, it's ludicrous. You know, it's one thing to be making that, but proving you're making a real difference. And then in 2 years, the crisis is done. Because I have no problem paying someone good money if they're being effective, right?
100%.
I'm all about that. That's one way I differ from some of my colleagues who said nobody should be making six figures. I said, you know what? They should if they're doing their job. Because
if you're good at what you do, you can make all the money you want.
In
That's the way I look at it.
In any other industry, you're not shamed for making six figures, right? You're actually like, that's amazing. But in social services, you are. The reason why is because generally speaking, they're ineffective. But if we found some miracle executive director who just got it and was making a real difference, they deserve good money because you want to duplicate that because they are, you know.
Well, don't you see that a lot of the people, and I've got social workers in my family, so I'm going to speak about those that I know. Hopefully, I'm not going to treat them as a monolith, but to me, they tend to is that they're a group of people that are kind-hearted. They think they're doing the thing that's best, but they're very, very amenable to whatever anybody else wants to do, and they're not real good at enforcing rules and saying you can't do that.
Yeah.
Am I right there that they're kind-hearted to the point where they're ineffective?
Yeah, and you know why is because, you know, they look at these individuals as victims. And because of that, you treat them as such. You walk on eggshells. You're scared to say, don't do that, or we need to fix this. It's like we have to rethink what a homeless person is, right? The fact is, regardless of how they ended up on the streets, they need direction. And sometimes that requires assertive direction, right? To try to break that cycle, right? Yeah. I'm not saying it's not everyone's fault they're on the streets, but if their bad behavior is keeping them on the streets, it's our responsibility as the public to call them out on it and be like, this is not working. This is a better option for you. Yeah. And that's what I've tried to tell people is stop coddling the homeless, stop treating them like a protected class, right? And let's work on helping them reach their fullest potential. You know, change sucks. It's like ripping a Band-Aid off. It hurts a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're going to love you for it at the end, especially when they become self-sufficient again.
Do you have your favorite success story? Somebody that you've known for years on the streets that was able to get out of the cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I've helped just thousands of people, you know, directly getting people off the streets. You know, I think back about 10 years ago, I was working for the state, and I was placed in charge of 50 plus of Oregon's most expensive clients, right? That were costing the state about between $1 and $5 million a year, basically, right? And so I was in a unique position. I was called a care coordinator to try to solve the problem, because even if I could fix one of the problems, it way more than paid my salary, right?
Right.
And one person I was really interested in was number 2 in the history of Oregon as the most expensive, right? Who was averaging minimum 500 ER visits a year, right?
That's so more than one a day.
Yeah. And he was costing the state of Oregon about $3 to $4 million a year. Right? And the thing is, there wasn't anything really going on with him except he was an alcoholic, right? And he realized he could milk the system, show up to the ER. They weren't allowed to say no to him. He'd get a meal, he would sleep, he would leave, he'd go back, get a meal, sleep. And every single time they were charging $800 to the state. So sometimes he would go in 3, 4, 5 times a day. And when I say 500 minimum, it was like way more than that, right? So long story short is I did my research and I really was trying to understand, how do I break this cycle with this guy? And I knew one thing to do is I had to figure out his alcoholism, right? Like it was completely out of control how much he was drinking. I found this very old medical record of his that showed he has high blood pressure, and there was a very short period of time in his life where when he was on this certain medication, he was not drinking for some reason, right? And I didn't really understand. I'm not a doctor, and I started doing my research, and long story short is I learned that this particular medication somehow also by lowering blood pressure had this secondary effect of switching something in his brain to be less interested in drinking. And I was like, well, let's focus on that angle. And so long story short, and by the way, I had to promise him a 6-day motel stay just to get him to agree to go to a damn doctor. Right.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, and so I kind of like had to justify this pretty expensive thing, but I wanted to break that cycle because I also realized one day in a motel was actually saving us money
than being at the hospital.
So long story short, after 6 days, he reluctantly said, I'll go to the doctor. He reluctantly went on this blood pressure medication. And long story short is I then tracked him for the next 3 months, and his ER visits dropped the first month by 98%. So in month 2, he had 2 visits, and both were for legitimate medical reasons. Month 3, he was ER for 1 visit for medical reasons. Month 4, 0. Month 5, 0. So it was this very small tweak that changed everything.
That is awesome.
He got sober. His blood pressure dropped. He got into housing. He talked to his family, and it broke the cycle. And so I was kind of like this detective and I figured it out and ended up saving the state, really millions of dollars a year. So it was kind of amazing for me. And I realized, wow, maybe I could do this with everybody. I'll share one other quick story, and it has nothing to do with really homelessness. I was working in a group home once, and we had this guy I was working with who was pretty much morbidly obese, right? Huge. And he would not stop drinking colas, which we couldn't really get him to stop. He had every right to do it as an adult, right? Because it was more of those independent living group homes. And everybody was worried about his weight and his health, and he's going to die. And he always said, I want to be healthy, but he would not stop drinking colas, right? And I was very brand new. I had just started, and I said, has anyone ever asked him why he drinks the colas? And they're like, well, no. I was like, well, maybe we should ask why he's doing it. And I sat down with him and I said, so what is it about colas especially you like? He goes, and he actually said, I don't really like colas. I just like the feel of carbonation in my mouth. And I was like, well, what about carbonated water then? Like, what if we remove the sugar? So I got him to switch to carbonated water immediately. And he's like, I really like this. He dropped 200 pounds, right?
Wow.
Started running, right? He ended up being 180 pounds. He became a runner. And it was just this little thing because we didn't ask the right questions. Yep. I asked him, what exactly was it about this that you liked? And he admitted, I don't like the flavor. I like the feel. For whatever reason, I don't know. He has some mental health issues. He liked the feel of carbonation in his mouth. Think about that. Yep. So we didn't ask the right questions. And that's the problem with the system is we got to almost be like detectives. We have to really get in their world and try to understand their behaviors and try to break those behaviors. So
and
that,
you have to
that's
do your job. I mean, what you were saying earlier, you know, at that point, Kevin, you're worth $274,000 a year. If you're saving millions of dollars by finding out these little things, right? At that point, you're worth what you're saving. We don't see that, though. We see far too many people just going in, and it's not just in the social services. Everybody, I'm an employer. It took me a long time to understand that most people will only give you about 80%. And you got to accept that's what you're going to get. And so if that's the top, when you're doing things like this, you know, you're taking ownership and going to the next level, you're the 100% guy. You're making everybody look bad. Let's talk about your Substack. What are you doing there, and what kind of stories are you telling?
Well, I write a weekly article on my Substack. I personally love that because Substack is this great opportunity for like independent writers to not be censored. And while I have a good social media presence, it's very short form. And so what the Substack gives me an opportunity to do is the long form, to discuss in detail about our broken system, about addiction, about mental illness, about homelessness, you know, and I kind of travel a lot too. And so once a week I write on, you know, harm reduction and housing first and homelessness and the trash and the broken system. And I've been doing this work for 30 plus years. And so I basically once a week just help educate the public about this system in a real thoughtful, unbiased way. And so I think that's a very important thing. I think there's such a strong mistrust in media, even media that you like, right?
Yep, 100%.
Because it could be entertaining, sure, but I think we can all admit that there's this very strong bias regardless, right? And I understand there's a place in this world for left and right media, sure. But like what I like about this independent media is I do my damnedest to stay out of politics and basically just write the reality of the streets, because people kind of appreciate that. It's like keeping the politics out of it and just talking about the brutal reality. I add videos and photos in my writing. I'm a very boots on the ground guy. I'm not the person that's going to read 10 books on homelessness and write an article on homelessness, right? I'm going to be out there and I'm going to spend months with the homeless and then write about it. So that is my experience. I am out there every single day, boots on the ground, immersed in these encampments, sitting with people smoking fentanyl. I see mental health crisis. I unfortunately watch a person die about every other day, and not watch them like a National Geographic videographer, you know, like watching someone die and don't stop them. We do every effort to try to save them, but there's so much drug use everywhere. People are just dropping like flies and dying of overdoses. So I see this every day. I see the violence. I see the sexual assaults. I see the crime. I've always been a big believer in firsthand experience, right?
Yep.
It's like, if you're going to talk about war, you better have been in the war. You better have been
100%.
on the front lines to truly understand, to help people understand what it smells like, what it feels like to be there. And so I take this very seriously. So every single day I'm out there and I'm in the mix of the chaos where I can really, truly understand what's going on out there. So anyway, that's what I do. And then I put it all into my Substack, which I would certainly appreciate people to subscribe. It's free, but people have the option of a paid subscription for $12 a month, which really helps support my work, because right now it's the only thing I'm doing that's making money. And I want it to grow so I could just do this completely full time, which is very important to me.
Well, Kevin, what you're doing, I think it's God's work. One of the things that's important, and I want to point this out. Anyone who follows my content knows that I'm highly political. I'm conservative as all get out. Kevin, I didn't ask how you vote or who you voted for. It doesn't really matter. The emergency that we have among our young people and these people on the streets is far more important. It transcends politics. I've been out there. I've lived on the streets myself. I know how tough it is. And it is substantially rougher and tougher today than it was when I was on the streets 40 years ago. Kevin, what do we do? And this is the last question I'll ask you. What do we do today? What can the average American do today to start bringing awareness to this issue?
It's a good question. So look, the social service system has convinced the public that only they do this, right? I have a master's degree. Somehow that makes them smarter. And that's just not true. I hate to say it. I'm not dissing on people with a good education. I have a good education. I am saying anybody with a heart, anybody with passion can go out there, talk to the homeless, pick up trash, really try to understand what's going on, and then educate themselves on the system and help these individuals, right? Make this almost a call to action team effort to do this, because at the end of the day, government isn't going to get it done, especially small local government, not small government, local government. They just aren't. All right. I live in a very progressive city, which is very frustrating to me because they're very radicalized and it's very hard to get them to listen to common sense. Right. So I encourage people just to do it themselves, because you could go to city council as much as you want, but at the end of the day, they've made their own decision, right? They've made the decision and it's not going to do much good. So go out there. There's a lot more of us than them on the streets, and fix this once and for all. But of course, there's other small ways, because not everyone's capable, but like supporting the work of people like me or the people like you that are kind of the voice of this in some ways, raising awareness. That kind of support is extremely helpful too, because this is what we do full time. So there's like a lot of different ways to help.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Our guest is Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin, we will be back in touch. I'm going to follow your story here and from time to time show content. It just shocks me what we're seeing on the streets. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, brother.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
CramerSez returns after this message from our partners.
Franklin D. Roosevelt said,
In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can be sure it was planned that way.
I don't make a habit of quoting FDR, but on this point, he's 100% right, which makes Vice President Vance's comments from last night even more important to pay attention to.
The only way to honor Charlie is to get to the bottom of exactly how this person was radicalized and who else was involved in it.
Hi, I'm Peter Flaherty, chairman of the National Legal and Policy Center. Since 1991, the NLPC has investigated and exposed the high crimes and misdemeanors of politicians and corporate leaders alike. Our mission is about one thing: accountability, not partisanship, just like Vice President Vance was talking about last night.
That is political terrorism, but it's not just the people who are killing the cops. It's not just the people who are engaging in throwing the Molotov cocktails and in the riots. Where was the money coming from? Who was organizing this violent activity? That is not going after Democrats unless, by implication, you're saying every single Democrat is involved in planning political violence.
For the past several years, NLPC is focused on who's funding the violence on our streets and the radicalization of our kids. Oddly, the same names keep popping up. Names like Soros, Hoffman, and Gates. The protests and the riots aren't happening by accident. The violence is not spontaneous. The left strategy is clear: encourage arson, vandalism, and looting, and then blame the violence on the law enforcement response. The protesters are well-funded and equipped, and the NLPC is digging deep into exposing those responsible for supplying these groups with the masks, shields, and other devices being used to perpetuate violence in the name of social justice. To learn more about our mission or to join it, follow and share us on this social media platform or visit our website, nlpc.org.
To learn more about the CramerSez Project, our mission, and how you can become a part of it, please visit thecramersezproject.com.
You're watching CramerSez.
Woo-hoo! It's Friday, December 19th. It is 10:05 Eastern, 5 minutes after the hour for everybody else around the planet. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. Yeah, I used to be a DJ a long, long time ago. Anyway, welcome back. I'd like to thank Kevin Dahlgren for joining us tonight and telling us about what's going on in Portland. The insights there are astonishing. I'd also like to thank him because I learned after we were done that he had been sick for the last few days, and so he crawled out of bed this morning to get that interview, so I appreciate it again for him joining us. Folks, if you get the opportunity to help us out, please go join us. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for time. If you've got what we're looking for journalists, we're looking for citizen journalists, researchers. If you're video, audio, if you know how to do any of the stuff that you see on this program, the graphics, anything, we're looking for help to build what we're getting ready to do next. It's a grassroots movement. We do not want to go in and hire a bunch of people that are just coming in to do it for a job. We want to have people that are doing it because they love what they're doing, and what we're building is something that the nation needs, an independent news service that isn't run by the mainstream media. So you'll find out more about that over at the CramerSezProject.com. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Yeah, we're back in on Monday. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Kramer Says Live.
This concludes this broadcast.
Please follow, like, and subscribe to be notified the next time
The Kramer Says Project goes live.